simulation of an earthquake that we just need to be aware of. If the alarms went off, you have to follow, the directions and, stay away from there. So, I think we'll come back to, hopefully it's not going to happen. but just in case. So that's it. I mean, I apologize. We usually, our students are very interested in everything, but this was extremely interesting. So we'll have to close it. So other than that, please, great. Excellent. And then just after Professor Turner, Harry's going to talk about Babson.
Yes, just for a few minutes, okay?
So,
perfect.
Great,
thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Friday afternoon, I didn't think I'd draw a crowd. Great to see all of you here. So I'm Bob Turner, as he mentioned. I'm an accounting professor at Babson College. How many of you know about Babson? Ever heard of Babson? All right, so Carol will talk a little bit more about this.
Everyone's hands will be raised.
We're in Boston, Massachusetts. We always get the #1 ranking for entrepreneurship. So our school, when it was founded 100 years ago, our founder predicted the stock market crash in 1929. So he made his fortune on an economic newsletter during that time. Well, in 1920, he went around the world and brought the sons at that time, because daughters weren't working in business in 1920, or not many of them. And he brought the sons of these business families to Babson to study, because he had this vision that if he could create a global economic world, maybe we could end world wars. So he was a very visionary person. And think about how many U.S. schools were traveling to Chile and Argentina and Mexico in 1920 to recruit students. Very few. So our students, we're in 3rd and 4th generation families here now from these different countries. In fact, any of you know about the Pool in Polanco? Pool? It's a co-working space, an entrepreneurship space. So we had an event last night. One of our alums founded it. So this is for entrepreneurs, people with new business ideas, and he's created this working space where people can kind of share resources and share ideas as well. So a lot of our students go into and form new companies. Does anybody know Ring, the mobile app for your home? So if someone rings your doorbell, you can see on your mobile app who's at your door. Does everybody know about Shark Tank? Yes. Well, he went on Shark Tank with this mobile app and said, think about this, you'll see someone at your door, even if you're at your office. They turned him down. So last year he sold it to Amazon for $1 billion. And Shark Tank didn't think he had a concept there. So nobody's perfect all the time, are they? So a number of our students start businesses, but a lot of our other students go into corporate work. And we were just at BBVA, Bank of America, yesterday, doing a presentation. We met with some of the officers of the bank, and they have a whole innovation space there. So it doesn't matter how big or small you are, you have to be entrepreneurial now, right? That's just a given in the world. We teach accounting, many of you here teach accounting. It used to be, in fact, when you think about accounting, yourself, if you were going to invest in a company, right, what would you look at? Would you look at their earnings?
Well, cash flow, fundamentals, any ratios that can give me a clue about the health of the company.
Right, so if you look at their financial ratios, why do you look at those?
To see its performance based on other numbers, not just earnings.
Right, so not just earnings, but other numbers. But what are you trying to do when you look at that stuff if you're about to buy the stock in that company?
To predict something.
Exactly. You're trying to predict the future, aren't you? Because if I don't own the company, what difference does it make to me if they made money last year, right? I didn't benefit from that, correct? But I look at last year's earnings, or more importantly, cash flows, to see if it's a good predictor of next year's earnings, correct? Does that work anymore? We were just talking. Does everybody know Kraft Heinz? The company? Do you know that firm? Right? This morning, their stock went down 30%. 30%. They had to write off $15 billion of goodwill on their brands, Kraft, Heinz brands, Now, who owns that company? It's a Brazilian firm, 3G, private equity firm that bought them, and probably were trying to get earnings up for those companies. So this just happened this morning, and a lot of it is around what kind of future products they're going to have. And the brands that they marked down were Oscar Mayer, which is a lot of processed meats, and the Heinz brand. So something went wrong there, correct? When the stock market goes down 30% in an hour on your stock, something went wrong, correct? So if you looked at earnings, was it necessarily the best predictor of next year? No. At BBVA yesterday, the banking industry, are they being disrupted these days? Banking? With what? FinTech, right? So their whole model is changing, correct? From what the business model was in the banking industry of 20 years ago and what it is today. After I leave here, I'm going to Bogota, Medellin, and then Lima. I was in Lima last year, and one of our alums was saying only 29% of Peruvians have a bank account. Think about the opportunity in that marketplace. So nowadays, it's more about the future and opportunities than the past earnings to tell us what's going to happen in the future, right? Which means you're looking at other factors. So, Lawrence Fink, has everybody heard of BlackRock? Right? What's BlackRock? Should bring it up here. What's BlackRock? Yeah.
I know that it was bought by Banamex in Mexico.
BlackRock?
Yeah.
It's, what is it? What are they?
Equity management company.
Yeah, it's the largest asset management firm in the world, right? And this is their CEO, Lawrence Fink. And last year he wrote a letter to 1,000 CEOs, and the letter said, it's not just about earnings anymore, but all these other things. What's your long-term strategy? We were just talking about that. At Babson, we partner with strategy, accounting and strategy. Because at the end of the day, your financial report should be the footprint for your business strategy, correct? You tell us what you're going to do. The financial report should show us that the results are there from whatever your strategy was. So he said, tell us about your strategy, long-term, not quarterly earnings. How do you plan to use your savings from the tax reform in our country? You know, we gave a big tax break to companies. So Lawrence Fink said, are you giving it out as dividends and stock buybacks, or are you investing in your employees? Are you investing in new products, new services? Because if you're just giving it away to your shareholders, why would I want to invest in you? Right? It's not helping me say anything about your firm in the future. What role they play in their communities? Whether they are creating a diverse workforce, right? Inclusion and diversity in the workplace. That's a big issue now, correct? Because if you're leaving all those people behind who aren't as well educated, what's the future going to look like? And where are the business opportunities if a big percentage of your population is left behind economically? So this approach is a real change in how people are viewing what they should be looking at when they're looking at new companies. Last week, and as a follow-up to this, one of the guys who's on Shark Tank, Damon John, who's one of the people who participates there, his comment was that his most successful investments have been companies who've had a positive impact on the community. Not just earnings, but had a positive impact on the community. So you see that in all different forms. We were talking about that earlier. Corporate social responsibility. Triple bottom line. ESG. How many of you have heard the term ESG? ESG? No? Okay, good. We'll take a look at that, all right? We'll talk a little bit about that. We were just in New York. One of our other alums was giving back to the community, and he talked to homeless shelters, and he found out that the biggest need in homeless shelters is socks. Socks. So he and his brother, both Babson alums, founded a company called Bombas, B-O-M-B-A-S. It means bee in Latin. They make socks. They reinvented the sock. It's a sock. They reinvented it. Their workforce is very inclusive. They have 75 employees. No one has ever quit. And in 4 years, Diamond, the Shark Tank, they invested in the company. In 4 years, they've grown sales from 2 to 10 to 50 to 100 million. In 4 years, selling socks. And for every pair of socks you buy, they give a pair of socks to the homeless shelters. So they've donated 12 million pairs of socks. So the company's about making money, paying their employees well, creating a diverse workforce in their company, and giving back to the community. That's their mission. So somebody came in and wanted them to cut costs and earn bigger profits if they were going to invest, and they said, that's not why we're in business. We have this broader perspective on what we can do as a company. So interestingly enough, Roger Babson, who founded Babson College, this was the pledge the students took in 1919 when they came to Babson. So Babson trained students who believe in fair play for all, so everybody benefits, honest dealings with employers and employees, fair prices, quality merchandise, and efficient service. So it was a much different perspective than when we moved towards one stakeholder, which was the stockholder. Right? Everybody's heard about ratio of CEO to lowest paid worker. Have you talked about that? Right? What does that look like? In 1965, what do you think that was? The CEO of a company's lowest paid worker. It was, I think, 20 to 1. What's it today? Hundreds, right? I mean, there's all sorts of studies out, but one I looked at was 270 to 1, right? So when you think about the shift in what business was and what we've come to, and then you think about the failures of some of these companies more recently, does it kind of indicate maybe we need to shift back to a more balanced perspective in what the purpose of the firm is, right? A stakeholder view versus a stockholder view, right? And it seems to be playing out. I mean, this is becoming, it's a tidal wave of expectations. In the EU, you are now required to file an ESG report along with your audit report of your company. It's a requirement as of 2018. So, how does this play out? And this is a little bit of Babson, this is one of our entrepreneurship faculty. But this is kind of how we talk about an innovative mind. And again, the innovative mind is important whether you're a startup, family business. Think about how many people in family businesses have to rethink their business model, correct? Any of you come from family businesses? Nobody? I was in Firenze, Florence, Italy. And one of my alums' family has a retail store right in the town square, right across from Duomo. And they sell high-end retail jewelry and Murano glass and things. And what was he talking about to me? What do you think his biggest threat was right now? What's that?
Fast fashion. Fast fashion.
What's that?
Fast fashion.
Fashion?
Fast fashion.
Right, okay, good. Else? Amazon.
Online retail.
Online. Amazon. Because now he's competing against Amazon. So this is a 3-generation family business in one town in Italy, but the world is affected by those moves. So this says, what do we do here? I mean, in Babson we talk about action trumps everything, right? If you have an idea, you go for it now. You don't have 5 years to think of an idea because 5 years from now the idea will be passé, right? Action trumps everything. You go and jump in. You do your due diligence, but you go for it. Finding that ouch point. I mean, what is the problem? Because if you're an entrepreneurial thinker, the problem is an opportunity. If something's not working, that's an opportunity then to create a product for that, right? Create a product for that. And then you build on that, and then it's a constant process of iterations. Because even though that product might be great this year, you're competing next year against a different one, right? And we just talked about banking being affected by fintech, craft foods being affected by changing eating tastes that they may not have been on top of. In fact, one of the companies I always used to talk about in class was Coke and Pepsi. Because if you've ever looked at their financials, they make money differently. You think of them being kind of a similar company, but when you look at their ratios, they're very different as to how they make money, right? Indra Nuri was the female CEO of Pepsi, and 7 or 8 years ago, she said to the stock market, we need to stop selling Pepsi. Now there's the CEO of Pepsi saying, we need to stop selling Pepsi. Why? Why would she think that way?
Because of it's more healthy industry, diet industry.
More healthy industries. Because what's the problem with drinking sugary beverages all day? Diabetes, obesity. So she's, as a visionary, saying, how do we think about our impact on the world, not just our earnings? Now, of course, does Coke and Pepsi generate a lot of cash? Lots of cash, right? About $10 billion a year each in cash flows. So, but she's saying, look, I'm not going to stop selling Pepsi today, but where are we going to be as a company 5, 10 years, right? So we have to be rethinking our business model. And those are companies that probably wouldn't necessarily think that you have to worry about the future. Well, I think last year for the first time, they sold more bottled water than Pepsi or Coke. So the market's going to change, whether you change or not. But it's a tough role for a CEO or a CFO if all the market says they want is quarterly earnings. Right? It's very difficult to be a visionary and to practice innovation when the only metric that you're evaluated on is, did you hit an earnings target for this quarter? We had a CFO, a good friend of our family, so she's been CFO of about 4 different companies. And when she took over this one company as a book publisher, she put in a new business strategy. Well, to make money, you have to spend money. After the first quarter earnings came out, the #1 shareholder sold every share of stock that day. And she called him up and she goes, what are you doing? He said, I don't care about your strategy. I'm in this for quarterly earnings. So very difficult to be a CFO or a CEO if the only thing you're hearing from your #1 shareholder is, what have you done for me today? Right? Very tough. So ESG is a process of viewing a company more holistically. So it's environmental, social, and governance. And what do you think, what is the problem that people have when you start talking about measuring a company based on their environmental or social or governance things? What do you think the pushback is from other people on that? What's the pushback, or what do people say? Why don't they want to see that stuff?
Because it's not always a nice picture, and it could hurt.
It may not be a good picture, right?
Expensive.
It's expensive. In what way? Just who's expensive? You? What do you mean expensive?
It's hard to produce things that are friendly, eco-friendly.
Okay, eco-friendly. So there's a lot of what they call greenwashing. Companies would make it look like they were doing well, but they really weren't, but they kind of say nice things, right? So one of the biggest issues is the left side. How do we measure this stuff? Right, can we measure earnings? Is that an accurate measure?
Yes.
No. No. Is earnings an absolute number? No. Can I play around with some estimates on my earnings forecast? Sure. Can I tweak a number here and there and get to that thing? So if the market says to me, I want $2 earnings per share, and I'm at $1.98, could I find 2 cents someplace? Probably. Right? I mean, if we had earnings failures in companies numerous times, we have in the States certainly, where companies kind of pushed those quarterly earnings and made it look like they hit the targets. So there's the same problem on that side. But in financial reporting, there's a couple different things. The information has to be relevant, verifiable, and enhance predictability. This is a requirement under IFRS, International Accounting Standards. So I testified in front of FASB once, the US branch of this, and when you testify, you have to talk about the information being more relevant than what we have and reliable, verifiable. Is this information good? So always with financial reporting, whether it's the earnings side or the qualitative stuff, environmental, etc., there's always the question about how good is the information. Because you're making your decision to buy that stock based on that information. So it's just as big of a problem on the quantitative side as it is on the qualitative side, right? But these things, like look at the things they look at, environmental issues, climate impact, environmental resource allocation. Is this sustainable? So if you're Kraft Foods, Kraft Heinz, what are you doing in terms of this? Because if you're stressing the water supply where you're producing products, is the business sustainable? If you're not dealing with how your whole supply chain, will you have those same business opportunities 5, 10 years down the road? Social, that's external, internal. Customer satisfaction, diversity in the workplace, tolerance, treatment of employees. And board governance, board compensation, corporate oversight, proper government engagement. Right, when we had the big market crash back in 2002, 2003, we put out new guidelines as to how we had to look at companies' governance structures. One of the new requirements was that somebody on the audit committee of the board should have an accounting background. So think about that. That would be like putting me in charge of the surgery review board at a hospital, right? I would know nothing about what I saw. So literally there were corporate boards with no one with a financial background looking at the audits and trying to make sense of those. So we had to literally require that someone should know what they're talking about, right? So and the other big thing here is independence of your board. What percentage of your board is independence? So ESG, Morgan Stanley has a database, we were just talking about this, it's called the ESG Manager, you've seen that? You can literally get like 1,000 companies, 80-page reports on each company that just details all of these factors by company. And every company is ranked or rated by the industry they're in. So these weightings differ depending on the industry, right? So think about Volkswagen. What happened to Volkswagen last year? Or maybe it's a couple years ago now. What happened to Volkswagen? Everybody?
They found that the explosions of CO2 were more than the way they were actually saying. Like they were exponentially more and more.
They played around with their software, didn't they, on the cars? Why'd they do that?
Because they want to be environmental friendly, but they were the least environmental friendly company.
And why did they do that?
To promote their company.
Right? And what did they cut back on? Costs,
Yeah.
correct? That helped their profits? Probably, right? Equifax, what happened to Equifax? Anybody? It's a big data management, kind of manages your personal data. They had a big data breach. If you took an ESG approach to how you evaluated the leadership team of a company, those factors would come into play. But if you say to a CEO of a company, the only thing that matters is earnings, that's their metric that they're going to play to. If you say to them, environmental concerns matter, they'll incorporate that into that as well. So, we have access to this ESG Manager database. Your library can get the electronic version of this, but it's a huge database on companies. They put this out through Morgan Stanley, and at the end of the day, the companies get to respond to what the database says about them. So they can go in and say, no, you missed a point there, right? You can respond to that. And their data sources, disclosures, sustainability reports, proxy reports, macro data on the industry that they might be in, databases from governments, and again, at the end, they invite companies to look at the information they're putting into these reports. So it's literally 80 pages long, and you can literally get tear sheets on every company, so this was Kellogg's, that kind of talks about their rank, overall score. Now they're a AAA company, in fact we'll put this up in a second here, they're a AAA company, and it doesn't say they're perfect. It just says relative to other companies in their industry, they're doing a pretty good job. Data verification. So they look at a number of different ways to verify the information. So it's not just an opinion-based database, but it's based on factual information. And this gives you some ideas of some companies in the region here and what their scores are. So Natura, AAA, AA, A, and these go down to like CCC. So, and you also get their chart over a number of years, so you get to see, are they improving or not improving in that particular area. And again, it doesn't mean it's a perfect system, but relative to other companies in their industry, their letter score says that they seem to be doing better on these targets. So the ESG changes by industry. So environmental, what do you think for Kellogg? kinds of factors would you look at in environmental?
Where are the supplies for the products?
Who said that? Supplies for where they're getting their foods from. All right, so that would be a big piece of this. And has any of you ever seen codes of conduct for suppliers? You have, right? So what is that about?
Well, your supplies must comply with certain rules, and for example, if you are going to buy some, I don't know, food, that person needs to comply with some environmental rules,
Right.
social, etc.
So if you are high enough on the food chain, you can dictate to your suppliers the expectations for them if they're going to supply products to you, right? And this is kind of across all different industries. So I teach a finance program for Dell, and they have a code of conduct for their suppliers. And this isn't a technology company, so they're required to meet certain standards, ranging from how do you treat employees in these suppliers to the companies. So you can build that into that. Other things in environmental.
Packaging.
What?
Packaging.
Packaging, right? That's because think about Pepsi selling a lot of bottled water now. That's another problem, correct? Now you've got the plastic issue. I think I saw something recently that in the U.S. alone, there are 500 million plastic straws a day. 500 million plastic straws a day that are ending up in landfill, right? So packaging, other things.
Waste production.
Waste production, great, excellent. So what's happening with that food supply? Other things?
Transportation.
Transportation, right? What does that get to?
Energy.
Carbon footprint, right? So where they, I have good friends who only buy wines based on the carbon footprint of where the wines come from. Right? And it turns out it's cheaper, I think he said, to get wines from France than California because of how they're transported, ship versus. So it's interesting when you start looking at this. The people are starting to look at that transportation issue. Other things, environmental. Others.
Like what type of energy they use to
Energy, how they're transforming their energy in the business as well. Another big one is water stress, right? Because if you're doing a certain region in, it's not a sustainable business. How about social? Social factors.
Doing products interested on good nutrition.
Good nutrition, right? So how are you dealing with that? Are you waiting till someone says they want the product? Or are you sort of thinking 5 years down the road and what factors might influence what people are eating? So another one of our MBAs said, I can't believe if I make a potato chip that tastes good, but that's healthy, I think people will buy it. So he started a company called Food Should Taste Good. And after 5 years, sold it to General Mills, and it was a private sale, so we'll never know. But it was probably in a range of $100 to $200 million. So in 5 years, he proved something that General Mills didn't think could happen. So now a lot of the food companies are going to MBA programs to talk to their food idea people because they'd much rather buy you at $5 million than $100 million, right? So now they're sort of looking to see what kind of new food ideas are coming through. So that's a huge change. But one of my MBA students currently is from Chile, and he said part of the problem for Pepsi is in certain developing nations, it's seen as a sign of having more worth if you can afford snack foods. Whereas in developed nations, they want less snack foods, they want more healthy foods. So it can be a problem for a company. You think it's easy to kind of change, but then you've got sort of a bimodal customer base, right, that might be looking for different things in this. Other things on the social end.
The employees' conditions.
Employees' conditions, you know. Think about companies that have to have a product recall. I don't know if anybody follows basketball. This is more of a U.S. case, but there was a big game. Did anybody see this or hear about this? What happened? The Nike shoe. What happened?
The shoe broke in half in the first 30 seconds of the game.
So this was a game between Duke and North Carolina. The tickets were going for more than the Super Bowl. President Obama was there. Spike Lee was there. People flew in for this first-year, 18-year-old player who's apparently supposed to be an amazing superstar. 30 seconds into the game, he goes to turn. The sneaker rips apart, he falls, sprains his knee, and he's out of the game. And people paid thousands for tickets to this game, and he's out of the game. So you can imagine Nike was putting out a lot of social media last night. So their stock price went down. And they said they hope he's doing well today. And I said, I bet you hope he's doing well because think about that lawsuit. So literally, the sneaker was halfway up his leg. It just ripped apart and fell apart. So product safety, all right, other things? All right, and how about governance? We've kind of already talked about that. What's the big issues in governance?
Representation.
What's that?
Representation.
Yeah, okay, right, representation, other things, independence of the board.
Employee inclusion and to have a diverse.
Employee inclusion on this, you know, so getting the voice of all the different stakeholders in there as well. Also the makeup of the board, percentage of women on your boards, right? So one of our alums is the chair of PricewaterhouseCoopers for the United States. He's got 47,000 employees. What do you think the average age is at Pricewaterhouse? 47,000 people. Average age? 27. Very close. 27. So as he said, the day he became chair, what was the first thing he did? He said, you can wear jeans to work. Now I went to work for Pricewaterhouse out of the 60s. I got a haircut, went to work, the manager said, get a haircut. I said, I got a haircut. Get another haircut. But Tim said, what do I care what you wear to work? I want smart, young people. And the millennials are different, right? They're looking for something different in the workplace. So if his average age is 27, if he doesn't respond to that, he's not going to have the workforce he wants, right? I mentioned the Bombas, the sock company. Nobody has quit that company. That says a lot. Nobody has left the company, right? Employee turnover. But he's changed the mentality of how they operate that. And BBVA was saying the same thing yesterday. They're trying to attract you, young people, and what are you looking for out of that job? Right? Is it material possessions? Is it experiences? If your view of what you're looking for is different, the companies have to sort of think about what is going to attract you to these opportunities. Right? You have to think differently about that. So governance, maybe, so what Tim said, he looked at the leadership of the firm. It was something like 40 partners with the leadership of the firm for the US, and it was all white men, or maybe a couple women. And in 2 years, he's turned that on. And he goes, that's not an easy thing to do, because that means some white male who thought that was their job, or their next promotion, may not have that slot, right? But to be willing to do that, not talk about 20-year process, but dealing with the issue right now. So it can happen. All right? Here's their tear sheet. Look at the factors over here. This is how they weight it, the percentage overall weighting. This is their score. This kind of tells you what quartile they're in. So you can see for them, their biggest issue was product safety and product recall. Right? It's kind of pointing out something they could work on. And this is the industry rating distribution. So only 5% in this industry got a AAA rating. So this data is pretty extensive on every one of these firms. Social. Opportunities in nutrition and health, they seem to be leading the pack there. A lot of our MBA students are starting food businesses. One guy's from Ecuador. There's a drink called waku, which has been used for centuries by Ecuadorians for digestive issues. He's now selling that. Has everybody heard of kombucha?
Yes.
Well, this is kind of a competition for kombucha, but it's a natural remedy. It's flowers and herbs that goes into this drink. It's been around for 100 years. He's now mass marketing this thing. Because people are looking for those healthier options. So you can see their biggest issue seems to be in product safety. And they actually talked about this here too. And it was, it's faced product quality and safety problems, recall of certain products. So it kind of pushes back at the company to saying, how carefully are you monitoring the supply chain and how you're producing these products, right? So overall, relative to the industry, they're doing pretty well. Right, top 5% of the firms. But think about looking at this as well as their earnings or their ratios of a company. think about how they're approaching these three buckets, ESG, and what does that say about the sustainability of the company? So no company is free from somebody disrupting your whole business model overnight.
Who gives the weights? Or the company is the one that sets their...
No. Nope.
Just of the firm.
This is the MSCI, which is Morgan Stanley. So if you go to the website, you can look at their whole methodology, how they do it, how they come up with these percentages. So every industry will be different, and the factors within the industry will be different. They still fall in those three areas, but they're different by industry. And obviously, if you're talking about, a food industry, you're going to see a heavier weighting on environmental. So when I looked at Equifax, that keeps track of all your personal information, theirs is more heavily weighted on the social because it's around the integrity of the data and the security of the data. They'd have a small environmental footprint around carbon footprint, but they wouldn't have these other issues. All right? So the factors change by industry as well. So again, there's an 80-page report behind this tear sheet. Lots of detailed information. How about this company? Everybody knows this company? Right? What would they look at?
Plastic production.
What's that?
Plastic.
Plastic, so that's going to be an issue, right? Like the town I live in near Boston doesn't allow any plastic bags anymore, right? So many times this stuff is local. People begin on a local level to change the way people approach this thing. Other things.
Maybe climate change, because coffee, Starbucks or any coffee, has a lot of risk to climate change.
So where are they sourcing their beans from, correct? And in fact, the person from Shark Tank was saying, if you're a company and you try to get to this sort of impact in your community, like giving the socks to shelters, they asked what shelters needed. They didn't just decide to donate socks. They said, what's your problem? So he was saying that if it's not a matter of just giving a check, right? Writing a check and saying, oh yeah, we collected money for your organization. He said, go to the people in your supply chain. Go to the farmers who produce the coffee. What do they need in their lives? That's where you have the impact, because this is part of your supply chain. It's part of your stakeholders. So get it from them. You're not dictating to them how you think you're going to help them. You're kind of asking them, what doesn't work in your life right now? There's a company in New York that makes brownies and other kind of snacks, and they sell to Whole Foods and different food chains. And they literally have, it's called, I think it would be before the end, but they have a policy of hiring anyone. You can have a felony record, you can be homeless, they'll hire you. So their motto is, we don't hire people to bake brownies, we bake brownies to hire people. Very interesting model. Very successful company, growing exponentially. But when some of the people were showing up late for work, these are people homeless, they said to them, why are you late? Well, one woman said, I'm a single mother. I don't have daycare. Right? So they opened up a daycare center. So don't just complain about what they're not doing well, but find out what the reason is behind this. So the social piece means maybe getting back into your supply chain to see what they need. All right, how about the social end? So they have what, Starbucks, what else? Domino's Pizza, gift chain, so lots of different food store chains. So on the social piece, what might there be?
To give an impression that they are not doing products for selling in high volume, and more personal products or more, like not just interested on high volumes of selling.
So not just high volume, but the quality of the product? All right, good. Others?
There must be a lot of food waste, I guess.
Must be a lot of food waste. How do they deal with that? All right, are there ways to handle that piece of it? Absolutely. Other things?
Health issues?
What's that?
Health issues?
Of the people buying the food?
Yeah.
Right? So this study that came out last week about processed meats, and I haven't had a chance to look at it, but it's kind of implying that it's not good long-term what's done into these meats, correct? In fact, in our country, they're lowering the age for colonoscopies because people in their 40s are now coming down with colon cancer. That was never the case 30 years ago. So something's different, right, in what we're putting into our body. Because if you go back 2 or 3 generations, everybody ate organic, correct? You bought locally. It whatever was made locally was your diet. Now we have the opportunity to get foods from all over the world, and oftentimes we don't know where they're coming from or what's in those products. So that's huge. And think about changing menus in these stores, right? Is there a need to sort of think about that more healthy eating? Or does the customer want that or not want that? Right? So how do you begin to get at what the customer's looking for? How about labor? Big issue, right? What are the wages paid? You know, in our country, a lot of stores are now starting to increase the minimum wage, even though it's not a requirement by the government. But they're saying it's not a livable wage anymore. So how do you deal with the overall labor management issues? All right, so I think the main ones on that. Here's their tear sheet. So raw material sourcing, where are they getting that food from? Carbon emissions. And you see they did well here, not on the raw material sourcing. Labor management, looks pretty good, right? Top quartile. Product safety, top quartile. Nutrition. But there's the dilemma, right? Think about Pepsi. If in certain countries, those foods are looked at as a sign that you are kind of moving into the middle class, what do you do when that's what they want? Right? So how do you think about changing food taste and how people approach their diets? Right? Not necessarily easy to do. Right? Other comments or? And corporate governance, so-so. Corporate governance, so-so. So probably looking at their board, their percentage women on the board, percentage independents, right? You'd like to see a board that's 80% independent, not 50% independent. So one of the companies that had a big tumble, I was looking at their CEO compensation. The CEO's bonus is based on earnings before litigation costs. What board would pass a compensation based on earnings before litigation? What's that saying to the CEO? Go for it. Push it, go over the line, don't worry. If we get caught, it's not going to come out of your pocket. Who would ever think that that was a good compensation package? Right? But of course this was found out, nobody looked at this, it was found out after the fact. Right? So if you're not looking at these things before, it might lead to a 30% drop in stock in a company that probably had earnings the previous quarter. But if you have to take a $15 billion write-down on your balance sheet in one quarter, it doesn't do much for your earnings per share in that quarter. Right? And you can see where they stand, A, but that still puts them pretty good compared to Kellogg because no companies were rated AAA. 6% AA, 13, so they're still doing well relative to other companies in the industry. So it's a relative score, but it certainly as an investor makes a difference. So BBVA was talking about, they have socially responsible investing funds because more and more of the millennials are saying they want to invest in companies that do take a triple bottom line ESG approach to how they run firms. So this was Equifax, not so good. Privacy and data security. If the CEO is being evaluated on data security, you get a different outcome. But if it's earnings, you get another outcome, correct? So who's not going, if your professors say your grades based on class attendance only, you'll probably come to class, right? If it's not based on that, it's only based on the final, you'll only put all your work into the final, right? We're all human. We're all being evaluated in different parts of our lives. If the metric system says do X, people tend to do X. So either we change the system, or you don't get different results from it, right? So obviously, they got some work to do. This is where the breach occurred, right? All your credit cards, all your information was made available, so not so good, right? But we could have known that back here. If we looked at that data, we would have known that. Right? This was not new information, but it was information that wasn't evaluated in the same way that earnings per share was.
Are they having economic consequences?
Sure. All these companies, like Volkswagen, what's that costing them? Is it 15 to 18 billion in lawsuits already that they had to pay out, right? So there's a consequence in terms of lawsuits, say nothing about your stock price. So if you just looked at earnings, you might have invested in Volkswagen the day before, and then you find out that they're cheating on their software programs for carbon emissions, right? So Facebook got a blip, right? It's a privacy issue. Say nothing about what it did to our election, but we won't go there. All right? In London, there's actually an ESG-linked bonds. Your interest rate on your bond is based on meeting ESG criteria. You get a lower interest rate if you are hitting these ESG factors. So this is laid out in a patent, and it literally is dictating interest rates on bonds. Because it's at the end of the day, this is risk management. How am I taking care of risk in the firm, and how am I making this firm sustainable in the long term? Right? And these are the 9 factors in that patent. So these bonds, you can literally lower your interest rate by looking at these factors. Look at the big mess we had with the asset-backed securities meltdown. Has anybody seen the movie The Big Short? The Big Short? The book is even better, right? We didn't know this was happening. What were they looking at all that time? Ratios. They didn't change their ratios. And what had changed? The way mortgages were dealt with. When I got my first mortgage, I went to a bank, they held on to it for, supposedly it was going to be 30 years. Now, it was give a mortgage and the next day they sold it. You think the mortgage broker cared if you ever paid the mortgage back? No, and the bigger the mortgage, the bigger what? The commission. I had a student in my class who said, I probably don't want to put this on my resume, right? Because, you know, someone came in and said, well, you can afford $300,000, you can afford $400,000. Next day sold the mortgage. Standard & Poor's didn't know this. They didn't change the way they rated these businesses, and as a result, a lot of people lost a lot of money. So, end of story. Questions, comments? I'm going to let Kira spend a couple minutes here. Anything on this at all? Yeah.
I just had a question. You didn't talk about public policy and the role of the government.
Yeah.
Because I think this is linked to, I have the impression, on the Agenda 2030, which is not very far from. But I just want to hear from you why there's no public policy, even in the U.S., hasn't been the strongest supporter or any of these changes about climate.
How much time do you have?
just to get your...
Absolutely, absolutely. So Boston flooded twice last winter. That's never happened. Water was running through the streets of Boston. The Marriott Hotel on Long Wharf, water in the lobby. I don't know what it's going to take to get people to understand this, but it's short-term, long-term, isn't it? Right? I don't want to change my car. Now, a lot of you may never own cars. When I was teaching at Dell, the vice president for marketing said, my son's 20, he doesn't have a driver's license. He said he's never going to buy a car. He said, Dad, you drive this car that costs X amount of money, and it spends 22 hours a day in the parking lot at Dell or in our driveway. Why would you do that? If I was like, interesting point, I never could have thought about it that way. So I think the young people get it more than others do, so people are hanging on. They don't want to give up things. They just did a survey in the U.S. that said, how many people would like universal health care? 80%. How many people want to pay for it? 20%. There's the problem, right? So I want it all, but not at my expense. So I don't want to change my lifestyle, but we know this is happening, right? So that's a huge problem. But that's what Larry Fink said in the letter to the CEOs. Business has to take part of this ownership now, because governments are very divided in many parts. You probably know that here as well, right? So there's issues. So he's saying it's not the role of business to sit back and expect government to fix things. It's got to be more public-private partnerships. But the issue of inclusion and diversity, well, if you wait for a law that says you have to hire, people of color, it may not happen, or it may happen way too late, right? In our country, the minorities will be the majority in 20 years. Well, if we don't care about educating these people or changing the way their opportunities, look what's being lost. Because they will be the majority in the US by 2030. So you can sit back and wait till 2030 to come and not have a workforce, or you can do something about it now. But it's very tough to, and this is what Larry Fink's trying to get at, the long-term view of success versus the short-term view. And unless we're willing to take that long-term view, we're going to be stuck with poor metrics that look at a very short period of time. So absolutely, that's got to be part of the picture, but business can weigh in on that, right? Our Department of Defense in the US said the biggest risk to defense is climate change, because it's going to lead to wars because of lack of resources, correct? So the Department of Defense put their report out 4 years ago. And yet now we have an administration who said we're backing out of the Paris Accord. So it's a little scary. But good point, it's got to be, oh, but he's saying we can't wait. People have to, the companies have to own this as well. Other things. So I'm between you and the weekend, is that
What do you think about the integrated reporting? Do you think it's captured the idea of
This?
ESG?
Is
Or
this captured?
different, or
You know, earnings is a moving target, right? How did we have the asset-backed security failure in 5 years ago, whatever? And, you know, how do these things happen? So I think what it says is if because of entrepreneurial, innovative changes, because every industry is being disrupted, you've got to take a more holistic view. You've got to be thinking about the sustainability of your products and services and the ability to change quickly. So if we don't have that integrated approach and you just look at earnings, all that tells you is what you did last year. It doesn't tell you if you're grabbing on those opportunities in the future. I know many people have been in New York. I grew up in central New York. Buffalo, New York, which has now been really a rundown city. In 1900, it was the wealthiest city in the United States. More millionaires per capita than any city. And now it's a pretty despairing place, right? And what happened? Eastman Kodak said people wouldn't buy digital cameras, right? So literally, people said, nope, we make this, that's what our customers want, we're not changing.
Is it easy to get access to the database of ESG?
Is it what?
Easy to get access to the database of ESG?
Can you get access? Yeah. You can actually check with the library. It's just an electronic resource. So our library buys it and our students get to use it. So you can look this up. And the CFA exam, which is the Chartered Financial Analyst exam for analysts, because I also teach the analyst program for Fidelity in Boston, they now have questions on this on the exam. So this is a ride. This is not just do-gooders. This is the investment world now saying this is risk management. Because the old models of evaluating firms won't work in the future because of all the disruption in different industries. So you can check on that. I don't know what the cost of that resource is, but it's a great database, and even if you're going into the investment world, this is something you should be comfortable with, right? Because every company is looking at this now. Because the EU requires it, it's only a matter of time before US companies in Latin America are going to say, we're going to expect that this is going to be a part. And then the issue is got to be audited. So this is a great opportunity for public accounting firms to get into this business because people expect that someone is checking the data. Let me give you a couple minutes here before.
Great, now I'm between them and the weekend.
That's right.
Thanks, Professor Turner, and thank you so much for welcoming us to campus. I was here in the fall, October. Met with about 5 candidates who were thinking about graduate degree programs from Babson. One of them applied to our MBA program and just confirmed his intent to enroll. He actually graduated from ITAM a couple of years ago. So he went off into the workforce and now he's coming back for his graduate studies. So I want to get a sense of who is in the room, okay? So I know a lot of accounting majors, right? Can I see by hand any accounting majors? What about finance? Other subject matters? Economics? Okay, any master's students? Okay, wonderful. Well, you got a really good taste of Babson just from Professor Turner's chat just now, right? That's very much the Babson approach, very interactive, right? Asking questions, asking for feedback along the way as well. And he also introduced you to a little bit of our history, right? A little bit about our founder. We really are a mission-driven institution. Our founder, Roger Babson, 100 years ago, his mission for the institution really is to educate entrepreneurial leaders who create both economic and social value. And the strongest emphasis on the economic and social value being done concurrently, right? As you just learned, you can't have one piece, right? You can't have the economic value for the long term without that social value as well. So that's very much what we preach and teach at Babson. Okay. So I want to quickly introduce you to some of our program offerings. Now, who by a show of hands knows that at some point they want a graduate degree? Someday. Maybe not next year. Okay, a lot of you. All right. Anyone right after they graduate from ITAM, they know they want to continue their education? Okay, one. Couple years, two. A couple years down the line, maybe your MBA. Okay, very nice. Yeah, so we have a whole portfolio of programs. And with that, the mission is ingrained into all of our programs, right? We're getting to educate entrepreneurial leaders who create that economic and social value everywhere, not in one industry, but multiple industries. And we're really known for our approach. We're really known for, like Professor Turner said, entrepreneurship. And what entrepreneurship means to us is not simply going out and starting your own business, right? It's not simply starting something of your own. We're getting our students to think and act and lead like entrepreneurs, right? You can think like an entrepreneur, but if you can't act like an entrepreneur, how do you take that step forward, right? So think, act, and lead like an entrepreneur, and that's why our students are so successful across a multitude of industries. So I'm going to quickly touch on our graduate degree program offerings at the moment. And so I want to start, who's looking at an MBA at some point? MBA? Okay. All right, a few of you, great. So we have an MBA that is geared towards students who have been in the workforce for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and beyond, right? They've gone out and they landed their dream job after ITAM, and they eventually realized maybe to take that next step in their career, they need the skill set and knowledge base, refresh, to take that next step. Or maybe they went out to their dream job from ITAM and they decided, maybe this industry isn't for me. I see myself pivoting my career. Those are a couple of reasons why you might go into an MBA program, okay? So after a couple of years, the average work experience for our MBA students is about 5.5 years. We generally look for right around 2 years minimum post-undergrad. If, for those of you who might be looking for specialized master's programs, by show of hand, anyone? Specialized degree in finance, business analytics, management. Okay, see, maybe, yeah. Not sure, want to learn more. Okay, so we also offer a number of specialized master's degrees. These are short, intensive programs, and they're exactly what they are. They're specialized, they're very focused, right? But even if you go through our Master of Science in Finance program, our MSF program, we're still educating entrepreneurial leaders who create both economic and social value, because that's tied into our teaching style and who we are at Babson, which I'll actually have Professor Turner touch on the Babson approach in a little bit, which I think you experienced. Our MSF students are in the classroom with our more experienced MBA students, but you can be early in career. So if you decide a year from now, as you're graduating from ITAM, you want that specialized degree, the applied program, that technical skill set in finance, you'll be in the classroom with your MSF peers, but also our MBA students taking finance electives. Next is our MSCL program, Master of Science in Management and Entrepreneurial Leadership. That's a mouthful, right? This is essentially a Master of Science in Management degree with that focus in entrepreneurial leadership. So how do we get you to become professional and have those leadership qualities and skill sets and be able to apply that very quickly? So these programs both are 9-month intensive programs. In our MSCL program, you're hitting on all of the advanced business topics, but your experience in the program, because it's meant for early in career professionals with 0 to 2 years of post-undergrad experience, is getting that hands-on learning. So you're working on semester-long consulting projects, you're starting your own business in small teams from idea at the start of the program. 9 months later, you're gearing up for launch. So even if you're not looking to start your own business, you're still having a deep understanding of everything that goes into a business, right? So if you're looking to go off into an accounting role or finance role, you know how the accounting affects the marketing for a company, among other things, okay? Lastly, we have our Master of Science in Business Analytics program. This program in fall 2020 will be a full-time 9-month program. Currently, it's a part-time program for working professionals, but we've had so much interest that we will be adding this to our portfolio of full-time programs. Our MSF and MSBA Business Analytics program, these are STEM designated programs, okay? So there's a benefit for an international student who's looking to apply the knowledge that they've learned in a program by working in the United States for up to 3 years after they graduate. It also acknowledges the quantitative and analytical rigor of the program as well. Okay. So I want to quickly, I know we're running out of time, just take a couple of minutes to really touch on the Babson difference. Professor Turner has been with the institution for, you're coming up on 30 years.
30 years.
Right? Wow. Yeah, you wouldn't know, right?
Started 10.
And here I am. Yeah, and as someone who's taught in our MBA program and our undergraduate programs for many years, I'd love if you could hit on kind of our approach, right, from a faculty standpoint.
Sure. Do you have 2 more minutes, or you about to run? Maybe ring the bell and get us out of here. So literally, working at Babson has been so much fun. Someone told me, by the way, if you don't want to grow old, don't move to Florida and hang around young people. So I'm going to teach till I'm 120, because it's fun. I mean, the people who come to Babson, I've taught the undergrad level, and I'm teaching in the MBA program. The people who come there are entrepreneurial thinkers. And again, many of them go into corporate world, but they're entrepreneurial thinkers. So they, again, don't see problems, they see opportunities. And they're always coming up with new approaches to these things and how they can solve social as well as economic issues. So I'm sure a lot of this is very true of ITAM. I mean, this is a great school. I mean, we were at the bank yesterday. Every one of the officers at lunch with me have gone to ITAM. So, I mean, obviously has an amazing reputation in the business community here in Mexico. And our approach too, it's when we talk about entrepreneurial thought and action. In fact, Kara, I'm going to make her take my accounting class next year. She says she won't do it. But people come into my accounting class and go, oh, debits and credits, T accounts, I hate this, I'm not going to do this. We don't even talk about that at the MBA level. These aren't going to be accountants. They're going to be business people who have to be able to look at financial results and understand what's going on for the company. So we teach every module in the program is integrated. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier, Antonio. You're involved with the center that has strategy and different people. So I'm sure you do the same type of thing here. Businesses don't have accounting, finance, marketing problems. They have business problems. And you have to have a holistic approach. So when they come into the program, I say to them, look, if you're good at accounting, don't worry about getting an A in accounting. You don't need that. What you might need is leadership skills or teamwork skills or supervising teams. Because at Babson, we de-emphasize grades because after your MBA, no one's ever going to ask for your transcript, ever. Unless you want to go to work for McKinsey, in which case they're going to ask for your mother's GMAT score and your father's GMAT score and everything else to get into those firms. But for the most part, they're going to want to know, can I use the material? So I say an MBA or a master's program is more about you, what your weaknesses are, and what you need to focus on. So grades, nobody cares about the grade. At the end of my class, it doesn't matter if you get a B or an A. It matters is, can I use cash flow information to help my business grow? So I think a good testimony to our faculty, Goldman Sachs started a program called 10,000 Business Initiatives, and they put up $500 million to go into blighted areas in the US and help entrepreneurs who had started a little business grow the business, right? Scale it up. So our faculty goes in and teaches faculty in those regions, and they become mentors for these businesses. But Goldman Sachs was willing to put $500 million into this program and use our faculty because it's, again, that entrepreneurial thought process. So in every case here, in my class, it's how do I use this information in a family business, in a startup, in a large company, not for profit. We have a social entrepreneurship center on our campus. People who want to make a difference as their full-time job. One of our alums started inner city weightlifting. You can go online, and ESPN did a special on him. He takes prisoners, teaches them how to be personal trainers, and then sets up contracts with companies like Microsoft, and those young men go in and train their employees as part of the wellness program. What a brilliant model. These young men can't get jobs otherwise because they have felony records. Now they can. So he's providing economic opportunity for a group of people that society had written off. So you can apply these skill sets in any one of those settings. And I think our notion here is much more around modular approach, lots of teamwork, which is why we de-emphasize grades, because at the end of the day, your grades are going to depend on your team being successful. In fact, one of my students was saying the company he worked for, he couldn't get a promotion until the person under him was ready to take his job. How he approached that job was very different, wouldn't it be? It's not about his success, it's about the success of the person who works for him. So you can teach people those skill sets, and you can provide that entrepreneurial thinking. I just came back from, I get to go to a lot of weddings of my alums, my MBA alums. So one was just in Greece, and one of the alums that came to the wedding, he and his fiance, he's the biggest TV personality in Greece now. So as we're walking down the street, everybody was stopping us for selfies. It's kind of saying, oh man, get out of the way. So I had to take a picture with Sakis. But Sakis is the biggest TV personality in Greece. two-year MBA grad. And he said Babson gave him the courage to take the risk to jump into a whole new field because he said, you know, so what if I fail? Fail fast and move on. Well, he didn't fail. He's now the host of Greece Has Talent, the host of, you know, The Survivor, the face of Coca-Cola for Greece. So he said, well, you've got to come back in 2 weeks for my wedding, Bob. I said, Sakis, I can't go to Greece every weekend. So there's a guy who's in the entertainment industry, but thought this mindset allowed him the freedom to fail, to try it out and fail. And that's what BBA was saying yesterday. They encourage their young people to try new ideas. And it doesn't matter if you fail, because if the bank thought it was a good enough idea, they gave you the time to work on it. And if it doesn't go anyplace, that's fine. That's entrepreneurial thinking, correct? But if you say to an employee, try it and fail, you're fired, nobody's going to be entrepreneurial in that company, correct? So it's that getting away from that fear of failure and thinking about it as opportunities, right? So, questions for us before we wrap up? Good?
Well, we have some business cards over here, some flyers if you're interested. I know there were a couple of sign-in sheets going around. Does anybody have that? Oh, you have all of them. Okay, there we go.
Okay, this is yours.
Okay.
And thank you for hosting us today. This is very nice.